She was born a ruler of fire, feared across the stars. But one human healer, lost and unarmed, dared to speak an ancient language no one remembered. What he awoke inside her wasn't just prophecy, it was life. Now, hunted by her own people, carrying a child that could unite or destroy two worlds, the Empress must choose between her throne and a future never written in the stars. This is not just a story of war. It's the birth of something greater: flame, dust, and destiny. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The twin suns of Neltharia hung low in the sky, painting the capital city in shades of fire and gold. Blagsingsi snapped in the wind as music filled the air. It was a day of celebration, a royal parade unlike any the people had seen in years. Empress Meryl stood tall on her chariot, draped in robes of obsidian silk, her eyes sharp beneath a crown made from the bones of extinct sky beasts. She was called the Flame of Neltharia, a leader forged in battle and hardened by betrayal. Her presence alone was enough to silence 1,000 voices. But today, that silence would be broken. A distant rumble shook the ground, light at first, then heavier. The sky shimmered as a small ship descended through the clouds. Not a warship, not a scout. Just an old, battered Earth shuttle marked with the universal emblem for humanitarian aid. The engines wheezed as it landed, scuffing the sacred path where the Empress's chariot was meant to pass. Gasps swept through the crowd. Armed guards snapped into formation, weapons raised. No one landed on Neltharia without permission, especially not on parade day. From the shuttle's ramp, a single figure stepped forward. He wore no armor, carried no weapon. Just a faded gray jacket and a weathered medical pack slung across one shoulder. He looked young, tired, and very much out of place. His name was Kalen, a field healer from a distant Earth colony, and in that moment he had no idea where he had landed. Kalen's boots crunched softly against the white stones of the Queen's path. The crowd stiffened. One of the guards barked something in the alien tongue, fierce and sharp. The meaning was clear: kneel or die. But Kalen didn't kneel. He raised his hand slowly and spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't know this was part of your celebration. I came to help." The words meant little to the guards, but Meryl heard them. She narrowed her eyes, preparing to give the command to strike. Her arm lifted halfway, then froze. Kalen spoke. Again. Not in the trade tongue, not in the current Neltharian dialect, but in something older, much older, a forgotten language that no human should have known. The sound of it rippled through the air like a memory returning from the deep. The crowd gasped again. Even the wind seemed to stop. He spoke the first words of a prophecy long buried in scrolls and stories, of a stranger from another world, unarmed and unafraid, who would step into the fire and not burn. Meryl descended from her chariot without a word. The guards parted for her, uncertain, wary. She walked slowly, her boots silent against the sacred path. She was taller than Kalen, broader, her presence overwhelming. And yet, he didn't flinch. He looked at her as one might look at a puzzle, not a threat. "What is your name?" she asked in a voice that could crack stone. "Kalen," he replied. "Kalen Darrow. I'm a medic. I received a distress signal from this region. I thought there might be wounded." "You speak with the voice of the First Queens," she said, more to herself than to him. "No school on Earth teaches this. Where did you learn it?" Kalen hesitated. "A patient," he said finally. "A Neltharian. He was old, dying. He told stories, taught me a few words. I didn't understand most of it, but it stuck with me." The Empress studied him, her gaze searching for any sign of deceit. What she found instead was something stranger: sincerity, and a calm that defied the storm building around him. "If you lie," she said, "your blood will stain this path." "Then ask me anything," Kalen said, "or kill me now." That silenced the whispers. Even the guards looked unsettled. No outsider had ever spoken to the Empress this way, and no one had survived after trying. But Meryl didn't order his death. Not yet. Instead, she gave a quiet command. Take him to the inner chamber. Do not harm him. Kalen didn't resist as the guards approached. He didn't look afraid. He glanced back once at the Empress and met her eyes again, not with arrogance, but something deeper. Compassion. It was such a simple thing, but to Meryl, it was more jarring than any weapon. That night, alone by the glow of her private chambers, fire, Meryl sat in silence. Her hands were steady, but her mind was not. She couldn't shake the sound of that voice. Those words, that calm defiance. Prophecies were stories told to children, warnings wrapped in myths. She had never believed in them. But now, as she stared into the flames, she whispered a name, one she hadn't spoken since she was a girl sitting at her grandmother's side. Valian. The name from the oldest scrolls, the one foretold to bring either salvation or ruin. Outside, the twin suns of Neltharia dipped below the horizon. Inside, the Empress rose from her seat and gave her next command. Send for the oracle, and bring me the scrolls. All of them. Curt. Wind blew quietly through the stone arches of the palace, carrying the scent of fire herbs and the faint whispers of the past. Kalen sat on a long bench in a dimly lit room, his hands folded in his lap. He had not been chained, but he knew he was not free. The guards who brought him here had said nothing. They had looked at him like he was something between a threat and a mystery. The silence around him was heavy, like the pause before a storm. He studied the room. The walls were carved with scenes from Neltharia's long history. Queens of flame, cities made of light, stars falling from the sky. Every figure was etched with care, every line glowing faintly with ancient energy. It felt more like a temple than a prison. Kalen had always been curious about other worlds, but he had never imagined he would end up in the heart of one's oldest legend. A sound behind him made him turn. A figure stepped into the room, wrapped in long gray robes, face hidden behind a smooth silver mask. The way the stranger moved was not like any guard he had seen, silent, slow, with purpose. When the figure spoke, the voice was soft and layered like a song sung underwater. You are not what you seem. Kalen didn't move. Neither are you, he replied quietly. The masked figure stepped closer. No human mouth should carry. The words of the first queens. No human soul should remember them. I don't remember them, Kalen said. I dream them. I hear voices sometimes, stories I never read, words I never learned. The figure tilted its head, and then, almost like a whisper said, then the prophecy breathes again. Before Kalen could ask more, the figure was gone, disappearing like smoke into the shadows. He stared at the empty doorway, unsure if he had imagined it. Later, the heavy door creaked open again. This time, it was her. Empress Meryl entered without her crown, without the armor of the morning parade. She wore a simple dark robe that made her look almost like anyone else. Almost. Her eyes still carried the weight of command, but they also looked tired, uncertain. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she walked to the fire and stood there with her back to him. My generals are furious, she said finally. They want to know why you are still alive. Kalen stood slowly, careful to show no disrespect. Do you want me dead? She didn't answer right away. They say your presence marks the return of an ancient danger, that I am cursed now because I touched you. Kalen took a step forward. Do you believe them? She turned her head, just slightly. Then, without a word, she pulled back the sleeve of her left arm. Wrapped in dark cloth, her hand now glowed with a faint symbol, a spiral of fire inside, a circle. It pulsed like it was alive. Kalen's breath caught. I didn't do that. I touched you in anger, she said. And my blood answered. She stepped closer. Her face was unreadable, her voice low. What are you, human? Kalen didn't try to explain. He slowly knelt, not in fear, but in honesty. I don't know, he said. Meryl stared at him, eyes searching for lies, for weakness, for something she could name. But there was only truth. Stand, she said. He did. She looked at him with something more than curiosity now, something like fear. There is a tale, she said almost to herself, one told by my grandmother. A being not of our kind, a stranger from the stars, not a conqueror, not a king, but someone who would change everything. Not with war, but with a heart that would not kneel. Kaelin waited. And now? I see pieces of that tale in you, she whispered. But I do not want it. Why not? She took a long breath. Because the tale ends in blood. There was silence again. Then her voice rang, louder, sharper. Bring him to the council chamber. Let the nobles see him. Let them judge if the stars truly speak. When the doors opened into the great hall, Kaelin felt the weight of dozens of eyes. The council chamber was a circle of stone and flame. Elders and generals stood in robes marked with ancient colors. None of them looked pleased to see him. He is human, one elder said with disgust. He has no place here. Another barked. He carries the cursed mark. What if he was sent to poison her blood? Meryl raised a hand, and the room fell, quiet. You speak of poison, she said. Yet none of you felt what I felt. None of you saw the mark. She turned to Kaelin. Speak. Kaelin stepped forward, nerves tight but voice steady. I didn't come here to take anything. I came because your people were in pain. I brought medicine, not weapons. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small blue packet. This holds enough medicine to cure a child of infection. Where I come from, these are free. Your outer cities don't even have clean water, the nobles hissed. One general stepped forward. You insult us with scraps? Kaelin met his gaze. I'm reminding you that life is worth saving. Silence again. Then for the first time, the ancient oracle stepped forward. Her face was thin and wrinkled like old paper. Her voice was like wind through bone. The Empress is not alone, she said. She carries more than memory now. All eyes turned to Meryl. Her face went pale. Slowly, she placed a hand over her stomach. The mark on her skin flared brighter. Her eyes widened with realization. This is impossible, she whispered. The oracle smiled gently. Not impossible. Destined. The sky above Neltharia had turned a deep gray, with ash falling gently like snow. The once bright capital city now stood in shadows. Buildings that had shone with golden stone were scorched and blackened. The great towers, once proud symbols of unity and strength, now leaned under the weight of smoke and silence. In the heart of the royal palace, Empress Meryl stood still, watching the flames rise beyond the walls. Her hand rested on her stomach. The mark on her skin had spread, no longer a single shape but a chain of glowing symbols. And inside her the child stirred, stronger than ever before. Kaelin stood behind her, bruised and tired. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew the city was no longer safe. The council had turned. The generals whispered rebellion. And now, explosions echoed through the air. The people who had once cheered for Meryl were either hiding or turning against her. Fear spread faster than fire. And fear, Kaelin knew, was often the first step to war. You should leave, Meryl said without turning. Her voice was steady but softer than before. They'll come for you first, then for me. They already believe I'm no longer pure. I won't leave you, Kaelin said, stepping closer. We can escape together. Meryl shook her head. I do not run. Then we fight, Kaelin replied, his voice quiet but firm. She turned to face him, eyes searching. You would fight my own people. For me? No, he said. For you. For the child. For what's right. A loud blast cut through their moment. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Horns blared from the distant towers. The outer wall had fallen. The rebellion had begun. Meryl moved fast, her voice ringing with authority as she barked orders to her remaining guards. But when they reached the main hall, It was already too late. The council chamber was empty. The nobles had fled. The throne. Room doors were thrown wide, and standing there at the center of it all was General Odros. He had once served her faithfully. Now he wore no royal colors, only black. Around him stood soldiers in full armor, eyes hard, weapons ready. "You betrayed us," Odros said, voice full of iron. "You opened your blood to an outsider. That child is an abomination." Meryl did not flinch. "You speak of blood, but you have none left in your heart." Odros stepped forward, hand on his blade. "You are no longer our queen." Kaelin moved to stand between them, unarmed. "Leave her," he said. Odros laughed, cold and sharp. "You speak now? The human who carries poison in his veins? You have no place here." "I gave her hope," Kaelin said. "That's more than you ever offered." Odros raised his hand and the soldiers rushed forward. Kaelin braced himself, but before the blades could strike, Meryl raised her own hand. Fire exploded from the floor, symbols carved into the stone. "By queens long gone," burned to life, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Two guards screamed as flames wrapped around their feet. Chaos erupted. Grabbing Kaelin's hand, Meryl led him through a hidden door behind the throne. They ran through narrow tunnels carved deep beneath the palace, remnants from the wars of centuries past. The walls glowed faintly with old energy, pulsing with each step. Meryl stumbled once, gasping. "Are you hurt?" Kaelin asked, catching her. "No," she said through gritted teeth. "The child. It feels danger. It's awake." They didn't stop. Behind them, footsteps echoed in the distance. Voices called through the halls. The rebels were searching. At last, they reached a narrow cave that opened into the forgotten tunnels beneath the Deadlands. It was quiet here. The wind outside howled like a wild creature, but inside there was stillness. Meryl leaned against the wall, her body trembling. The fire that once gave her strength now flickered low. "I don't understand this," she whispered. "This was never supposed to happen." Kaelin sat beside her. He didn't speak right away. Then softly he said, "What do humans do when their queens are in danger?" She looked at him, confused. "They protect them," Kaelin said. "They stay." Her lips trembled just a little. But before she could answer, a noise outside caught their attention. The crunch of boots on stone. Shadows moved beyond the cave entrance. 3 figures stepped in. Mercenaries. Their armor was scratched and dirty, their helmets hiding their faces. They held weapons not of Neltharion design, human tech, illegal, stolen. "The mighty queen," one said, voice mocking. "Reduced to hiding like prey." "Leave," Kaelin warned, standing in front of Meryl. The lead hunter raised his weapon. "We've been paid well. Dead or alive, you're worth a fortune." Meryl pushed herself up, weak but still burning with will. "I am not dead yet." She raised her hand. Blue fire burst from her palm, hitting one of the mercenaries square in the chest. He screamed, falling back into the sand. The others charged. One swung a blade at her. Kaelin moved without thinking, throwing himself between them. The blade cut into his shoulder, warm blood spilling down his arm. But he didn't fall. He punched, the attacker hard, driving him back. Meryl gasped and stumbled again. Her hand went to her stomach. "Something's wrong," she whispered, falling to her knees. Kaelin caught her, gently lowering her to the ground. Her skin burned with fever. Her body shook. The child inside her glowed brightly beneath her skin. "Stay with me," Kaelin whispered, touching her face. "Breathe." The last mercenary stepped forward, blade raised for the final strike. But before he could bring it down, a blinding light exploded from Meryl's body. The air cracked. The cave shook. The hunter screamed and vanished into the dust. When the light faded, everything was still. Kaelin looked down. Meryl lay in his arms, unconscious but breathing. Her skin still glowed faintly. The fire hadn't come from her hands this time. It had come from the child. The night was silent. broken only by the soft rustle of wind sweeping through the canyon. Ash still drifted across the ground, glowing faintly under the starlight like embers that refused to die. Inside the cave, the fire had long burned out, and the air had turned cold. Kaelin sat beside Meryl, his back against the wall, her head resting gently in his lap. She had not stirred in hours. Her breathing was slow and shallow, but steady. The glow on her skin had faded, but the warmth of life remained. Kaelin watched her in silence, brushing strands of dark hair away from her face, his fingers trembling not from fear, but from the weight of everything they had endured. Outside, the world had changed. Neltharia's capital had fallen into chaos. The rebellion had taken control, spreading lies that Meryl was dead and her bloodline tainted. The people were told their queen had betrayed them by letting a human touch her soul, but in truth Meryl was still alive, and inside her, a life had taken root, one that neither side truly understood. A child of both flame and dust, born not through war but through a moment of destiny. Kaelin's shoulder throbbed from the cut he had taken during the fight. He had bandaged it with pieces of his shirt, but the pain no longer mattered. All that mattered was Meryl, and the faint pulse he could feel whenever he placed his hand near her stomach. The child moved sometimes, not in panic, but in rhythm, calm and strong. It was as if the baby already understood the danger outside and had chosen to wait. Kaelin stood, careful not to disturb her, and stepped out of the cave. The sky had turned a pale blue, hinting at dawn. Somewhere beyond the mountains lay the ruins of the first queens, ancient stones said to hold knowledge lost to time. The oracle had spoken of them once, barely more than a whisper. If the mark on Meryl's skin meant anything, if the child truly carried something sacred, then the answers would be there. But it was far, and dangerous. Still, Kaelin had made a promise. He would keep it. He looked back at the cave, at Meryl lying still, her hands resting over her belly. He leaned down, kissed her forehead gently, and whispered, "I'll come back, I swear." The journey was brutal. The heat of the desert burned through the soles of his boots. The wind stung his face, and dust clung to his clothes like a second skin. He had no food, no clear direction. But the deeper he went, the more he felt pulled, like something was calling him. The land seemed to recognize his steps, and as he reached the edge of the ruins by nightfall, the air changed. The stones rose from the earth like the bones of giants, carved with symbols that glowed when he approached. At the center of the ruin stood a single stone, tall and smooth, marked with the same spiral that burned on Meryl's skin. As Kaelin stepped closer, a figure appeared, not solid, not real, a being made of dust and light, a guardian. "You are not of her blood," it said, its voice echoing in Kaelin's mind. "Why do you carry her flame?" Kaelin stood firm. "Because she trusted me, because the child is ours, and because I love her." There was a pause. Then the guardian bowed. "Then take the gift. But remember, every gift has a price." A symbol lit up on the stone. Kaelin placed his injured hand upon it. He felt warmth, then cold, then a flash of light. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the cave. Meryl gasped, her body arching as breath returned. Her eyes opened wide, glowing gold. She was alive. Kaelin rushed to her, his voice breaking with relief. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised," he said. She reached up and touched his face. Her skin now carried more than one mark, circles, stars, lines of fire. Her whole body seemed to hum with quiet energy. "What happened?" she asked. "You were dying," he said. "So I made a deal." "With who?" "With the past," Kaelin answered. "The spirits of your people, the ones who remember what you were meant to become." Meryl's eyes filled with tears. "And what did you give them?" He looked down. "My name. My line. From now on, the child carries both of us." She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the child move. "He'll have a place in both worlds." "Yes," Kaelin said. "But first we get out of this one." They traveled under cover of night, avoiding rebel patrols and abandoned outposts. By the time they reached the edge of the capital, the city was silent. The flags of rebellion hung from broken towers. The people had been told their queen was dead. But then the gates opened. Meryl stepped through the ash and smoke, her robe torn, her crown gone. But she walked tall, strong, glowing. Kaelin walked beside her, and behind them, life. Her hand rested on her stomach. The child was near. As they passed through the streets, faces appeared from the shadows. Old soldiers, frightened civilians, even young rebels who had never known her before. They watched her in silence, and then one by one they began to follow. In the throne room, General Odros stood waiting, draped in stolen power. He raised his sword as they entered. "You were supposed to be gone," he said. Meryl said nothing. She simply lifted her hand. The markings on her skin flared, and the throne behind him cracked open. The true seat of power revealed itself, ancient and shining. "You are not the queen anymore," Odros shouted. "No," she said softly. "I am more." The power that had once slept in their blood now woke. The past returned, and in the center of it all the child moved as if to say, "I am here, not just the end of war, the beginning of something new."